Good morning. Good morning as we let people in. There's not a lot of people here yet. Hello, everyone. We're letting people in, but not a lot of people here yet in person. There's John. Got bad weather, but that doesn't mean we're not here together. That's right. That's my saying for this morning. We're letting people in. We are recording. We are soon going to be streaming. Judith is in and out today. She's here now, but she may not be later. That's what that means, I assume.
That's what that means. Tile guy is doing.
Rosemary was going to join us in person today, but I think she's, excuse me, I think she's now handling some stuff. So Judith, you might actually be reading today too, for whatever time you're here.
All righty.
As you're the reader. The book of Joel is on the agenda today. It's not a long book of the Bible. Well, let me just hit that we're streaming. It's not a long book, but it's not the shortest book. So both, let me get in here. As far as the books of the prophets, it's actually about the length of the book of Jonah, except this, the book of Joel doesn't have a cool story and a big whale in it, but it's, yeah, a couple of the lines are going to be familiar. Whoa, I need some feedback in here. Hold it a second. That's one. Still. We have feedback.
Echoey for us on the Zoom.
Oh no, it's really bad in here. I'm just assuming that some mics are turned on here. Let's see. Hopefully this will be better. Yeah, hopefully this will be better now. So, yeah, we're rainy, but we're not raining hard right now. What's the weather like down by the beach, Judith?
Also kind of drizzly. Last night it was pouring. It was really unpleasant to walk the dog. I don't know who was wetter, she or I, and I had a coat on.
Yeah, well,
we're supposedly not raining now till 3 if you trust the marina guys.
okay. We are I don't know. I'm trying to get the camera around here. The camera's going like, I didn't know the camera could even go that far around.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm making it come back, but I had no idea that.
How's the leak?
What?
How's the door leak?
about the same. We've got to, I mean, it hasn't been fixed yet, so we've got to fix it. I could probably show it to you. No, I don't think it'll come up, but it's, I mean, the important thing is I think we know where it's coming from and we can hopefully fix it. Yeah, John's the only person here right now in person. All of the other people are sitting in their very dry rooms right now, which is nice.
Can the camera turn around to show his face?
Yeah.
No,
I don't know. I think that's, wait a second. The camera can show that of John.
Oh, nice arm. Hi, John.
You're back.
perfect. This is perfect.
He's hidden by it.
We
But
saw your
yeah,
face,
you
you have
guys
to
are,
kill us, right?
Listen to this. I got one-on-one Torah study.
yeah, that's right. You guys are,
This, I am like
He's-
5 feet away. We are doing serious Torah.
this is yeah, this is jujitsu.
This isn't mono and mono.
This is jujitsu. This is jujitsu Torah study. Close combat Torah study. The yeah, this is well, let me get the text up here. Yeah, the Nathans aren't here. I mean, I don't know. But people are probably they're probably in their warm beds right now. So I don't blame them. As long as you're reading, as long as you're following along with us. There's a couple of people on the Facebook with us too. So that's good. But we'll keep an eye out for later. I mean, it's still, it's nice. We have, 10, 11 people with us already. But yes, not in person. So we're reading the prophet Joel today, which a lot of people are surprised that there's a prophet Joel. Sounds like a guy you went to camp with, but Joel is actually an old name. I mean, it's not like a new Jewish name, but I don't think there were a lot of Joels over history. There weren't a lot of, it wasn't a super popular name throughout Jewish history, which is why I guess when it came back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, that's why you don't think of a lot of older guys named Joel. But the name Yoel in Hebrew means God, the Lord, right? The Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh name is God. Yoel is what it means. So it's it's a name used elsewhere in the Bible, but again, it was not a super popular name throughout Jewish history, like some of the other names that our grandparents and great-grandparents were named. But, and we don't know anything about him, other than, as we're going to read in the first line, his father's name is Petuel. That's it. That's the only thing we know about him. We don't know exactly where he's from. We assume, according to tradition, that he was from the Judah side of the country, from the Judah side, from the south. We also assume, based on his prophecies, that he, we used to assume that he was prophesying against, or at least for Judah, using Israel, the northern kingdom, as a warning, as what's happening to them is going to happen to you. That was the theory, and again, I think that was kind of like what the traditional feeling was about Joel, was that he lived, and that's why he's placed towards the beginning of what we call the minor prophets, right? We read the first prophet, Hosea, who we know from the text lives while the kingdom of Israel still exists. So we know he lives before 722. We assume then the next prophet is Amos, who also lived before the northern kingdom was destroyed, that these early prophets are at the beginning of the minor prophets because they are chronologically the oldest prophets. The later prophets, the last ones like Malachi, Zechariah, they're at the end of the minor prophets. So the organization we have and the organization that the churches follow really follows this chronological placement of where these minor prophets are. To some extent, that also is with the major prophets, with Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, with Ezekiel and Jeremiah being later than Isaiah. But Now many scholars think that Joel was written not before the exile, but after the exile. So many scholars today consider him what they call post-exilic, which means he wrote after the kingdom of Judah was destroyed by the Babylonians after 586. That's not the traditional belief on it, and that's not it's not definitive. There's no proof in here that he wrote it after the temple was destroyed. Most people today, I'd say most scholars believe that it is written by one person. Just because it's a short book doesn't mean it would necessarily have to be written by one person. I guess you could say the odds are better that it's not a combined text, but there are a couple of different parts of this prophet, this text that, some people said maybe it's written by two different authors, but most people today think it's written by one author based on the linguistics, based on the themes that go throughout, words that are in every one of the chapters, things like that. But yeah, the dating of it's is a little tougher. We have no information. He's not referred anywhere outside of the book. So we don't know for sure because we don't know anything else about him anywhere in the Bible. What else can I tell you about Joel? We believe that he's buried in the land of Israel, actually up by Sfat. There's a traditional burial place that we think Joel was buried. And there are things in the book of Joel that we're going to see that were important for Christians later on. So Christians, it's not like he's quoted a lot in the Christian Bible, but there are parts of Joel, especially kind of there are apocalyptic parts of this and kind of like parts that are, for people who've read the book of Revelation, this is a text that some people think affected early Christian writers a lot, especially the more apocalyptic pieces of it. But it's not a very long book, as I said, 4 chapters, but also some of the chapters are really short. Also, interestingly, we have it in 4 chapters. The Septuagint has it in 3 chapters, same verses, it's just organized a little differently. The Christian Bibles normally follow the four sections that we have in the Hebrew Bible, which is interesting because they don't follow the Septuagint on this as having only 3 chapters. So, but there are versions, translations sometimes where people follow it by the Greek organization, where there'd be 3 chapters instead of 4. Chapter 3 being included with 3 and 4 included together. So you'll see sometimes it'll say like notes, this is chapter 3 or it's chapter 4, depending on the version of the Bible people have. But I don't know. Any other questions before we dive into Joel? Well, I guess you got to look at it before, and you'll see how it compares to the other books that we've read. So
I always ask if that's if we read it with anything else.
Yes, a very good question. How does Joel pop up in our liturgy? So Joel is not. That's another thing. We don't find it a lot in our prayers or in our haftarot, those kinds of things. The places we normally find it. We do find an interesting quote, and it, I was gonna, well, I'll definitely share it to you when we get to it. We actually talk about Joel, or we quote Joel. I think the most famous part, or the one that stands out in my mind, is in Passover during the Seder. So there's actually a quote from Joel in the Seder, which was probably like the first time that where I ever said, "Oh, that's a prophet I'm not really familiar with," and that's probably stood out in my mind as like, "Oh, that's why, again we kind of oh, we got to know more about this guy if he's in if he's in the Seder. But there is one other thing I'm going to share at the end that I have all loaded up, ready to go, which I'm not going to tell you. It'll be a surprise. But there is one other liturgical use of Joel, which is more modern, but one that I always loved. And gosh, it came out. Yeah, I'll get to it when we get to it. I promise. I have something special planned. Well, special for me at least. Hope you enjoy it too. So Judith, would you like to take over?
Sure, why not? The word of God that came to Joel, son of Pethuel. Listen to this, O elders. Give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has the like of this happened in your days or in the days of your ancestors? Tell your children about it, and let your children tell theirs, and their children the next generation.
Well, that's kind of a nice line, right? Or it seems like it could be a nice line that you're going to tell people about what happened, and not just one generation, but for generations, they're going to be talking about what's happening now. But let's see if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, it looks like it's not a good thing.
When the cutter has left, the locust has devoured. What the locust has left, the grub has devoured. And what the grub has left, the hopper has devoured. Wake up, you drunkards, and weep. Wail, all you swillers of wine, for the new wine that is denied you.
Yeah, that's not a good thing, right? Let's talk about what just happened, because this is actually one of the most famous parts of the book of Joel. This is one that people kind of key in on. What did they just talk about here, Judith? Which you'd think that this was the Passover thing, but it's not.
No, it's not.
This is not the quote for Passover. But what did they just talk about? What do we talk about at Passover?
We talk about plagues and insects.
Yeah, specifically locusts, right?
Mhm.
So locusts make a very prominent appearance in the story of the plagues. And of course, we talk about them at Passover. But that's not the part that we have from Passover, actually, from Joel. But what we do have is something that we want to just point out real quick. This poetic structure that he has about locusts. And he has 4 different names for locusts. We'd have them translated as cutter, locust, grub, and hopper. Now, what they probably are
Variations.
different size. Maybe some people say that they're different. This translation kind of follows that they're different levels of the development, right? The different ways that a locust develops through its life, right? Some people say it's different types of locusts, different phases of a locust swarm. The plague in the Bible is one of the last plagues, right? It's one of the last plagues, and it's also a double doozy because it hits with the plague of hail, which is fiery hail that destroys the crops. This also is about crop destruction, but it's just the locusts that do it. The locusts are enough to destroy everything. Now, locusts are a definite, real threat to humans. They cause, when they descend, they destroy crops. Which in turn causes starvation and death. So swarms of locusts, when they descended on people's crops, were a sign of death. Locusts eat their weight every day in green stuff. Whatever they're eating, they eat their body weight every day.
More than that, isn't it?
What?
I would think it would be more than that. They're not very big.
Well, that's every day. What if you ate your body weight every day?
Well, yes,
John?
but
What if you ate your body weight every day?
yes, but Locusts are small.
Theoretically, yes. So they do it every day. And so when they destroy things, it's not like partially destroyed. When they descend on a field and on an area, they leave nothing. So it's insane because everything is destroyed. And when you pick one locust off, right, it's a grasshopper. It's not that big. It's not that scary. But what it does with the cumulative effect of literally, in some cases, billions and billions of grasshoppers, when they descend, it's unbelievable. So they've had, I mean, the last really horrible locust infestation was, I think, in the 50s, that hit Africa and just destroyed, and it was the last time that like tens of thousands of people died because of locusts. The United Nations actually has a division that does nothing but go around and destroy locusts before they attack. So they track locust formations and they destroy them before they can do this. So yeah, it's a real threat to. It has been a real threat to human survival. It's one of the reasons why, obviously, it was one of the 10 plagues. But through human history, until recently, until we had the kinds of insecticides that we can lay over, with planes, there was nothing you could do. There was nothing a human being could do to stop locusts. There's nothing. So it's one of the few things where you literally say, this is a scourge from God. This must be God willed this to happen. Because literally, can you imagine? The sky becomes dark, literally becomes dark, and then it descends and there's nothing left. So it must be just literally, you can understand why people felt it was supernatural. I mean, I've seen them, on film. I've seen videotapes of, or whatever, film of what happens, but it's always been controlled. Ever since we've had the ability to tape this, record it, we've had the ability to destroy them. So, we're playing around. We know we can destroy them, but you can imagine for people who didn't, this was a terrible, terrible threat. So the question is this allegorical? This is a metaphor, or did it actually happen? Did these locusts actually hit, and did they destroy the crops and the food that the people had? Is this something that happened which caused people to have a theological response? Or was this something, again, not necessarily literal? We don't know. We don't know if this actually happened, or if we know it could have happened. So it's not like it's beyond the possibility that it happened, but we don't know for sure that it happened. And we also don't know if this is, again, therefore literal, or whether this is more a metaphor. But we do know that they have 4 different words for locusts. We got one, which tells you we don't come into contact with locusts very much. They did. They had 4 different words for them. So, yeah.
In the book,
Yeah.
The last sentence of the first paragraph of the description of Joel is pretty interesting. It says the readers of the book of Joel are asked to imagine the terrifying plague of locusts and its horrifying impact on society and the natural environment. So based on what you said, right, is what we know, right? So we're asked to place ourselves way back then when they didn't even really understand certain things. Probably. Yep. Or they've seen it before, but they said, this is an act. It has to be an act of God. Yeah,
there's no doubt that when people saw this, they thought they were being punished, that this was an act of God. I really can't stress this enough. This is not, they didn't process this as going, oh, well, this is an infestation of, this is just an infestation of animals that move around and, kill everything and then they die off. And, they had to have seen this as God is angry at us. And
Because they didn't have the ability to correct the situation, they didn't have the tech, they didn't know how to deal with
exactly.
it. Came
So,
out of nowhere.
and this must have just made people freak out. And I mean, you can imagine, I mean, their economy was destroyed, their food stores were destroyed, I mean, they'd have to move. I mean, I can't imagine, because the whole cycle of replenishing, it's weird to think that, like, when the crops are destroyed, like, let's say there were trees, and they pick the fruit off the trees, or they pick the fruit off the vines, right? And then the next year they don't have to plant new vines because the vines are there. There's just new grapes come. There are no vines left. I mean, I know nowadays they cut back the vines, and they didn't do that in the old days. Or just take a tree, for example. The tree's leaves fall, and those leaves become mulch. And the ground has fertilizer there's nothing left. And so the next year, it's not like the food's going to come back. There's no mulch. There's nothing for the crops. It becomes, for years, it's probably going to create a situation of erosion. There's not going to be crops. So the whole area could be. So I would say this, what we're looking at again for what the way we can compare it is that earthquakes and the earthquakes and those kinds of things, like locusts, are part of it. Were seen as supernatural. They were seen as something that God did. So yeah, so his this is a wake-up call for people. But again, look at this. Judith?
I'm
you
here.
sure?
For a nation has invaded my land, vast beyond counting, with teeth like the teeth of a lion, with the fangs of a lion's breed. They have laid my vines waste and splintered my fig trees. They have stripped off their bark and thrown it away. Their runners have turned white.
Yeah, it seems as though this is not just about locusts, that this is about an invasion from somewhere else. So is it really locusts, or is it something else? Or is it both? Did the locusts come and now this is a lesson that this is happening? The way he says it, it's already happened. But
I think the nation is the locust.
well, that's most likely what happens. Though people say that no, the locust really happened, and it's representing what's happening, what's going to happen. But it's a question, again, for people who think that this was written after the exile, is he using these as a metaphor? The locust happened during his time, and that makes him think about what happened with the Babylonians. Just you kind of have to see the whole thing to kind of make a decision on it, especially if it's written by one person. If it's written by one person, then one person just, kind of thinks about what's happening or what happened. So let's take a look.
Lament like a maiden girt with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. Offering and libation have ceased from the house of God. The priests must mourn who minister to God. The country is ravaged. The ground must mourn, for the new grain is ravaged. The new wine is dried up. The new oil has failed. Farmers are dismayed, and vine dressers wail over wheat and barley, for the crops of the field are lost. The vine has dried up, the fig tree withers, pomegranate, palm, and apple, all the trees of the field are sere, and joy has dried up among the people.
Yeah. So if this already happened, then, this is a description of what happened to the kingdom of Judah when the Babylonians came, or is it going to happen? You can see, though, he uses a lot of imagery from trees, from agriculture, from fruits, things that people enjoy, things that people turn into wine, things that people that have traditionally has been a symbol of good things. Probably some translations of this do not have the words. It says a pomegranate, it says the pomegranate, right? The fruit of the vine first, the vine, the fig tree, right? The rimon, which is the pomegranate. Then it says the palm, which is really the date. I don't know, why they're trying to be poetic about. It's clearly about the fruit. The tamar is the fruit there. Then it says tapuach, which they translate as apple. John, does yours say apple? Does it say apple in the list of fruits? On our fruit salad in verse 12.
Pomegranate, palm, and apple.
Yeah, he's got apple.
Mhm.
Mary, do you have apple in your translation?
Yes, it says apple.
You do, because you have the King James. And ever since the King James Bible in English, the translation for tapuach has been apple. Now, I will tell you in modern Hebrew, tapuach is the apple. If you go to Israel and say, I want mitz tapuchim, they're going to give you apple juice. They're also going to think you're 3 years old because only little kids drink apple juice in Israel. Actually, for the most part in America too, but you don't ask for apple juice because they'll think you're 3. Is that for your little baby? But apple juice is not right. It's a bad translation. It's a bad translation. Unfortunately, the King James people did not understand in the 1600s. They did not have apples in the land of Israel during this time. And I'm not harping on this, but it just shows you that people assumed that that fruit would be the apple, which is one of the reasons why there was no apple in the Garden of Eden, only because they had no apples. How the apple became the symbol of the fall goes more to the Middle Ages and the fact that apples were the fruit of choice of Europe. Much of Europe, not all of Europe, but much of Europe saw the apple as a beautiful fruit. It didn't exist in the Middle East yet. It had not made its way from Asia. Eventually it did, became a symbol of wealth and it's a nice fruit. I'm not bagging on apples, but it's historically inaccurate. There were no apples in Israel at the time. Didn't make it there yet. So the true translation for that probably should be, and you'll see it sometimes when people try to get real with what the fruit was in the Garden of Eden. Well, first of all, it doesn't necessarily have to look like any fruit that we would have because it's the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. It's not necessarily fruit that you and I would ever come in contact with. Though, of course, it makes a big difference for Apple computing, which has used the apple as a symbol for many years now. But it's either a quince. They had quince back then. And they also think perhaps the tapuach was an apricot. So could it have been an apricot? Yes, because that they did have in those days. But it is some type of fruit. It is interesting, though, again, it is historically inaccurate for it to have been an apple in those days. Regardless of this, these are all enjoyable fruits. These are all sweet fruits. These are things that people would have enjoyed eating. Again, why the translation, the palm, kind of misses the point because it's figs, pomegranates, dates, apricots, all nice fruits that we like. And they're a symbol of joy. They've been destroyed. So the fruits are gone. These fruits that we enjoy. But again, more important about the apple, it wasn't in the Garden of Eden. Well, look, I guess anything could have been in the Garden of Eden because it's God's garden, but it's not if it was in the Middle East.
Gird yourselves and lament, O priests. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Come, spend the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God, for offering and libation are withheld from the house of your God. Solemnize the feast, a fast, proclaim an assembly, gather the elders, all the inhabitants of the land, in the house of the eternal your God, and cry out to God. Alas, for the day of God is near. It shall come like havoc from Shaddai. For food is cut off before our very eyes, and joy and gladness from the house of our God.
Yeah, so there's a little note, you'll see that above where Shaddai is, right? It's another name for God, right? We sometimes call God El Shaddai, God the powerful, the mighty. It's another name for God. And here it's used, and it's not used a lot, but it's definitely a play on the previous word, which is, it shall come, right? It shall come. It's close. This day is close. Karov Yom, day is coming. And it says, U kishod mishadai, showed me Shaddai. So that's a play on the name Shaddai.
Oh,
And so it works when you know the Hebrew, and they don't throw out the name of Shaddai a lot. But when they're saying like havoc, like destruction from Shaddai, it is pretty well, it's a powerful rhyme. It's powerful alliteration. Not really alliteration, but rhyme. Yeah.
word.
And we see this phrase, Karov Yom Adonai, the day of God is near. The day of God seems like it's not a good thing, at least here. The day of God here seems to be like havoc, seems to be a day that you don't want to have happen. The phrase at the beginning, aha, which they translate as alas, aha, it's more of a
Ugh.
sigh than a It's not a I just figured it out. It's not that kind of aha. It's almost, again, losing your air. It's a sigh. It's a kick in the gut. So it doesn't seem to be a good thing, this day of God. Doesn't seem to be something we're looking forward to, which is why we start to get this idea in the book of Joel, which then will pop up later in Christian scriptures, that there is a day of God that's coming. That's a reckoning day. It's not a good day. It's a day when you better have your act together. You better be ready for it, because it's going to be a rough time. Now, that doesn't seem to be something then we're not excited about that day of God. But let's keep in mind that maybe, again, that's followed by other stuff. Now, we know that from even a basic just living in America, understanding that all the references to the rapture and to, end days, that this stuff is a big part of some Christian theology. But of course, this is where it starts to come from. It comes from the prophets, and specifically, again, we saw a little bit of this in Ezekiel, for example. We saw the Gog and Magog stuff, but this is a flat allusion to the word Yom Adonai, the day of God. Okay, and that's pretty significant. It's one of the things that's significant about Joel, if you will, especially for more apocalyptic forms of religion, specifically more apocalyptic Christianity. This day of God thing is here. So this does not seem like a good thing.
I read that. For food is cut off. Yes, I read that. The seeds have shriveled under their clods. The granaries are desolate. Barns are in ruins, for the new grain has failed. How the animals groan. The herds of cattle are bewildered because they have no pasture, and the flocks of sheep are dazed. To you, O Eternal One, I call, for fire has consumed the pastures in the wilderness, and flame has devoured all the trees of the countryside. The very beasts of the field cry out to you, for the watercourses are dried up, and fire has consumed the pastures in the wilderness.
Yep. So the first part of this are allusions to stuff that farmers would get, right? They would get it. Your crops are going to be destroyed. There were also allusions in there, of course, to the temple, the fact that the temple didn't have anything, which makes sense if there's no crops. But remember, the temple also needs to have some animals, has to have sacrifices. Those are also going to be gone because the beasts of the field are also not going to have anything else to eat as well. That's what this last part of this is about. They have no pasture, right? The herds of the cattle are also now going to die. And that's the other thing that happened when the locusts would descend, is if they're going to destroy your crops, they're also going to destroy the green grass and stuff that the sheep and the cattle and the goats are going to eat, which means they're going to die too. And that's going to be a slow, painful death to lose your animals as well. So you're either going to have to move or you're going to have a lot of dead animals on your hands.
Which is cool because the animals are playing.
Yeah, the animals did not do anything to deserve it, as John just said. Yeah, this is the devastation that affects everything: your food, your economy, your transportation, your livelihood, your sacrifices, your way to even pray. So this is a powerful thing. And it says the beasts of the field cry out to you, by the way. Capital. Which seems to imply the beasts are crying out to God, right? Right. So the animals, I cry out to you, God, and so do the animals. So, yeah, I mean, here it also says the water is dried out too, which I don't know if that had to directly, it was affected by the locusts, but it's a pretty destructive situation that's happened. And here it says fire as well. So those are all these horrible things that happen in chapter 1 with this day of God, which again seems to be at least connected to a locust swarm or attacks from other countries. But whatever it is, this is God punishing us. So what do we do about that? What do we do? And again, this is a very short book, so that's a quarter of it. Actually, it's more than a quarter of it. Let's look at chapter 2.
Blow a horn in Zion. Sound an alarm on my holy mount. Let all dwellers on earth tremble, for the day of God has come. It is close.
That's the same phrase. Day of God has come. Or again, it's close. I don't know. There it says the day of God has come. It is close. That's the way it ends with Ki Karov. It is close. I mean, you'd think it is close for the day of God has come, but it's not the way it's written. What does this day look like?
A day of darkness and gloom, a day of densest clouds spread like soot over the hills, a vast, enormous horde. Nothing like it has ever happened, and it shall never happen again through the years and ages.
So this seems to have not happened yet. It's going to happen. Yeah. That's what it seems like from here.
It was a little spooky because it could be a mushroom cloud.
Sure. John says it's like a,
right?
John says it's like a mushroom cloud.
Cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. But the cloud and the darkness is definitely
Move on to the next book.
another part. John's scared. But here it is. And here it is.
Move on to Amos.
Their vanguard is a consuming fire. Their rear guard is a devouring flame. Before them, the land was like the Garden of Eden. Behind them, a desolate waste. Nothing has escaped them.
Okay, so yeah, it's a pretty powerful line, right? Before them was the Garden of Eden. Once they've passed, desolate waste. Yeah, there were a lot of people who looked at the prophet Joel and said, what's he talking about, right? Is that happened? Is it going to happen? Is the day of the Lord still coming? Well, if it's about something that's yet to happen, look, when you read prophet Joel, it seems like it either happened or is about to happen. It's close. I mean, it says it's close. It's happening. For people who think that it hadn't happened yet, that means they're always looking for it, right? That's why there's still people today who say the end times are coming and it's going to be terrible. But throughout history, whenever there was a invading horde there, that people said that this was what it was. So when the Mongol horde descended across Asia and then even into Europe and crossed through Israel, by the way, and destroyed a lot of the what later would be really set the stage for what would be the destruction of much of the Middle East by the Ottomans. But the Mongol horde destroyed everything, and people saw this. When Christian scholars, priests described the Mongols coming across into Europe through Russia and places like that, they said it was like this. It was like what the prophet Joel described. They were there, they destroyed everything, and then they left. They just left. I mean, unlike most countries that had, like invaded a country and then said, "Oh, you're now part of our country." They didn't do that. They just took everything and killed people and raped and just destroyed everything. To people that this is what it was like. It was like locusts. So there were a lot of people who referenced Joel and these words during the times of especially the Mongol invasion of Europe. Yeah. Anyways, look at this.
They have the appearance of horses. They gallop just like steeds with a clatter as of chariots. They bound on the hilltops with a noise like a blazing fire, consuming straw, like an enormous horde arrayed for battle.
Yeah, and that's what the Mongol look like to them. They almost look like centaurs, according to the Christian descriptions. They look like they were fused with the horses. So you can understand why people saw this as happening to them. Yeah, this was seen as something that was going to happen, but clearly Joel sees it happening during his time.
Peoples tremble before them, all faces turn ashen. They rush like warriors, they scale a wall like fighters, and each keeps to his own track. Their paths never cross. Not a single one jostles another. Each keeps to his own course, and should they fall through a loophole, they do not get hurt. They rush up the wall, they dash about in the city, they climb into the houses, they enter like thieves by way of the windows. This sounds like from The Mummy.
Yeah, but it also sounds like he's going back to describing the locusts.
Mm-hmm. The locusts. Before them, earth trembles, heaven shakes, sun and moon are darkened, and stars withdraw their brightness. And God roars aloud at the head of the divine army, for vast indeed is this host. Numberless are those that do God's bidding. For great is the day of God, most terrible. Who can endure it?
Yeah. So this is a scary thing, but Joel is describing this as this is God's scourge. This is the scourge of God. This is what people thought. If this is happening, it must be God that's controlling this. So
it's interesting because you can read into this because this is what happened then, which was apocalyptic, right?
Yep.
Because the locusts were the modern technology of the time. I mean, opposed to storms and things like that. In modern times, come up with something else. The atomic bomb, the flu.
Yeah.
Something that's man-made to a certain extent. And they're just the symbols, the analogy, I guess, the metaphor, right? Am I missing?
Yeah, no, people have always seen it like this. I mean, look, before even Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan was, just the amount of territory the Mongol armies conquered is just unbelievable. But before that, the first scourge of God that the Christians first, because the Christians were really looking at this as like, maybe this is going to happen. I mean, it's not that Jews didn't think it was going to happen, but they didn't have a homeland anymore. So, like, if you're going to attack you, it was going to be wherever they attack, wherever they lived. It was no longer seen as like we have a country to defend from either locusts or from people. But for Christians, yeah. And so Attila the Hun was actually the first scourge of God, which wasn't that long after, Christianity became the religion of the empire of the Romans, right? Then you have Attila, and then later on you have Genghis Khan, who was called the scourge of God. All of these kinds of things, whether it's this text or Ezekiel, Gog and Magog, this is like come to life. And John is saying, yeah, and there's the modern equivalents too. Look, I think if you're sitting like, well, at least the way they depict it in the movies, and John knows this better than anybody, but the way they show it in the movies, when the people in the NSA or whoever's sitting by the keyboard typing away, and they're watching their files get destroyed, right? They're watching their files get eaten up by a virus, which of course doesn't usually happen in real time where you actually, see your files being destroyed, but they have to depict it in the movies. It's kind of like that, right? So if you were watching, files being eaten up or being destroyed, you'd think it was like locusts coming down and eating your stuff. I mean, again, that's the way they depict it in the movies, but the reality is that there is a technological version of this that's very much a possibility now, which is, people's information technology. Usually people are trying to, hijack it and take control of it rather than destroy it. But there have been cases where people have not really been interested in gathering it, but just destroying it, more to be vindictive or to be destructive than to capitalize on it, right? To make money off of it. If you destroy it, you can't make money off it, unless of course your goal is to hurt somebody's ability to, to have something. But usually people want to control it rather than destroy it. But yeah, I mean, if you see that again, you see it in the movies where people are watching their files get eaten up, really.
The threat of this fear is another guardrail, right? Life's guardrail,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you go all the way back to the very first part
Yes.
of right? If you drunk, crazy people, right? You know, every day you work, then you drink, you work, you drink, you work, you drink, then you die, right? Well, so it's more than that.
Yes. And this is the nightmare, right? This is the nightmare that people have. And how does it manifest today? Look, there's parts of this, again, they ascribe this as God's punishment, right? God's letting this happen. God's ordering this to happen. This is under God's direction. That's clear. But if you think about it, again, when he says numberless are those who do God's bidding, he means it in the sense that they are I don't know that that's really, Mary, that's not you don't have numberless as your translation, right? In verse 11?
No.
No.
Let's see.
It just says a vast number.
For his camp is very great.
Yeah. It's not, but anyways, the point is that like the locusts, there's just no end to this, to how many people are attacking them. But here's the good part. Verse 12. Judith, you're muted.
There you go, based on what it's saying. That should be the head.
What is Judith? You there?
You might be
Oh,
doing
she
it.
might. No, she says she's there. says she's there, but she's muted. All right, I will continue then. Because this is where, again, the last line is, we read for the great day that she read is for the great day of God, most terrible, right? Norah me'od, who can endure it? But verse 12 says, yet, even now, says God, turn back to me with all your hearts, and with fasting, weeping, and lamenting. Rend your hearts rather than your garments, and turn back to your eternal, your God. For God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, and renouncing punishment. And that is the phrase that we use all the time for God. We say it at high holidays. Ki chanun v'rachum hu erech apayim v'rav chesed. We say v'emet, sometimes to add to that when he's truthful, but also renouncing punishment, which is nichem al hara'ah, which is another way of saying he's giving up on the bad stuff. Ra'ah, the bad stuff. So God will stop this from happening if we repent, right? This is repent and it'll be okay.
Is that why it's part of Yom Kippur?
Yeah, but that's not from here. It's from Exodus, that first time we read it, but it's also quoted in other parts of the Bible, including the book of Jonah, which is one of the reasons we read Jonah at Yom Kippur, because that phrase, God, he says to him, God, I know you're gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in kindness. These are terms that are used to describe God. God is the God who is compassionate, right? Is Rahum, is merciful, right? This is the name that we use. This is the word that we use all the time. When we say El Maleh Rachamim at our funerals, we say God is full of compassion, full of mercy. So that is the phrase that we use. So if God will hear our plea, and what's interesting, of course, is God, he says, God wants us to rend our hearts, not our clothes, which of course tells us that in those times, people were rending their clothes, right? They were ripping their clothes in those days as a sign of repentance, as a sign of sadness. What we do at funerals, we do something that's called kriya, which is what this word is. Kir'u, which means rending, to cut, to rip, to tear. Kir'u, tear your heart. Don't tear your clothes. Tear your heart. That's the word that's used, to tear your heart, rend your heart, open your heart, break open your heart. Essentially, it's saying you're going to have your heart cracked open to some extent in order to do that. And we see that a lot. That imagery is used a lot when we say that God asks us to uncircumcise our hearts, right? To cut off the outer shell of our heart. God is asking us to open our hearts. So opening our hearts, sometimes the metaphors that are used, the imagery that's used are cuts or tears. That essentially say it's only a broken heart that can have, can really be a heart that has real feeling, is one that has also kind of been broken open. There's this idea that it has to be open. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Section 2.
Yes.
12.
Yes.
I read the preface
Yes.
for Joel.
Yes.
And the last sentence in the preface basically identifies 2:15 to 27, so not even 12, right? We haven't gotten to 15 yet.
Correct.
I haven't read ahead.
Okay.
And it indicates that that's part of the 2:15 to 27 is part of the Haftarah on the Shabbat prior to Yom Kippur.
Yes. So we're going to get to when we actually read it. Yeah.
But my question to you is, for me, again, this is it's really jumping out at me this time, is section 12, where it says, with fasting, weeping, and lamenting.
Yes.
That's Yom Kippur,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Which is why we read it before Yom Kippur. Exactly. Because it
But-
talks about fasting, weeping, and lamenting.
But you had discussed that this was also appropriate for Passover.
We haven't gotten to that part yet. Part of it was the locusts, I guess, maybe even a little in the back of their mind, but we haven't gotten to the part that we actually read at Passover. That part, there might be a note in the book too when we get to it. But hold on to that. But yes, Yom Kippur, this part is why we get to that. So this is, who knows, but God may turn and relent, right? Like maybe God will, not punish us, right? And leave a blessing behind. For grain offering and drink offering to the eternal God, blow a horn in Zion, also something we do around the high holidays. It says, tiku b'shofar, right? To blow the shofar. Solemnize a fast. There you go. Another fast. Proclaim an assembly. Gather the people, bid the congregation purify themselves. Bring together the old. Gather the babes and the sucklings at the breast, which is the word for the babies. Let the bridegroom come out of his chamber, the bride from her canopied couch. Everybody, get everybody, including those that are just getting married, even little babies. Have them all come out. Everybody. Between the portico and the altar, let the priests, God's ministers, weep and say, "Oh, spare your people, Eternal One. Let not your possession become a mockery, to be taunted by nations. Let not the people say, 'Where is their God?'" Again, we have this appeal to God to help. And part of it is, don't make us a mockery, because then it's going to be, where's the Jewish people's God? Did God love them and now God doesn't love them? Maybe there's no God. Maybe there never was a God. So you need to make sure, God, that you take care of us, because again, we're your possession, right? We are your people. Something we also say at Yom Kippur. And then it says,
It's a plea.
yes, it's a plea. It is a begging. Then God was roused in behalf of this land and had compassion upon this people. In response, and again, this is why we read this at Yom Kippur, or before Yom Kippur. In response to this covenanted people, right? The covenanted people, God said, "I will grant you the new grain." Gosh, this is such a bad translation, because it left off Hineni. God said to the people, Hineni, Hineni, Hineni. I'm here. I'm here. Hineni. God said, "I will grant you the new grain and the new wine and the new oil, and you shall have them in abundance. Nevermore will I let you be a mockery among the nations," right? "I will drive the northerner from you. I will thrust into a parched and desolate land, its van to the eastern sea, and its rear into the western sea. And the stench of it shall go up, and the foul smell will rise." So God is going to knock this other nation away from us. And again, you see the northerner, right? Is it the locusts, right? Is it these locusts, or is it this army? Is it supposed to be the army? So you can see the Dead Sea,
Of course, that's
the
interesting.
Mediterranean Sea.
If it's the locust, which he created, it's like, I'm doing this to straighten you out, to put the guardrails on,
Yep.
and now I'll remove it,
Yep.
as long as you live within those guardrails.
Yes.
Quite,
Yeah. And this is why, if it hasn't happened yet, it's a warning, and it's, please don't let this happen. "Fear not, O soil, rejoice and be glad, for God has wrought great deeds. Fear not, O beasts of the field, for the pastures in the wilderness are clothed with grass. The trees have borne their fruit, fig tree and vine have yielded their strength." So there again, the fields for the farmers will be okay. The soil will be great. The beasts will also be great. So those things that, again, and John pointed it out, these animals, if the flora and fauna haven't done anything wrong, they're going to be punished. Of course, they're being punished because it's the way to affect us. But if they don't get punished, they'll be okay. They'll be okay. And here it says, "O children of Zion, B'nai Zion." That's the phrase, B'nai Zion. Sometimes we have Bat Zion, daughter of Zion, but here it's for everybody. It's not talking about a person or a figurative person. It's all of us, like B'nai Israel. But here we're called B'nai Zion, B'nai Zion, B'nai Zion. There's a synagogue's named B'nai Zion because It's the children of Zion, or the children of Jerusalem, the children of Israel. It's another phrase. O children of Zion, be glad, rejoice in the eternal your God, for you have been given the early rain out of kindness. Now the rain is made to fall as formerly, the early rain and the late. This is another example of words for rain that we don't have. So the translations are early rain, late rain. The word Geshem is one of the words for rain, but the other words that we have is in Hebrew is this word malkosh. And in some cases, in one case here, the word moreh is used for rain as well. So there's a couple words used for rain here, but like the words for locust, these are words like we don't really have translations for them, but there's like, you know, an early rain, like when it really is pouring, you know, a heavy rain, a downpour, you know, and then maybe a later rain that's a little bit more gentle. But all the rains are going to be God's, right? And it's going to happen in a good way. The threshing floors shall be piled with grain, and the vats shall overflow with new wine and oil. Right? So you're going to get your crops back. The crops will be there. And again, your wheat, your vats, which will have wine and oil, right? The vats could have either thing in them. And look what happens. I will repay you for the years consumed by swarms and hoppers, by grubs and locusts, the great army I let loose against you. And so here, whatever it is, whether it's the locusts in real terms or whatever destruction that happened, you will get back. I will make you whole, which is the better translation, right? Or the translation here could also be double what you had. I'm not only going to make you whole, but I'm going to make you whole by giving you twice as what you would have had for those things. And again, this is why we say it's probably written by one author, because the same text is used there, right? The different types of locusts are used here again. Swarms, hoppers, grubs, and locusts. Those same four words are used for locusts again. Some people, by the way, actually, both Jewish and Christian scholars later on would say that those locusts actually represent different armies that attacked us over time, right? Different people that conquered Israel. So some people during the time of the rabbis, they said by that time, well, who had come against us already? Well, the Egyptians, right? By the time of the rabbis, right? During the Roman era, said the Egyptians, right? The Greeks, the Persians, or the Babylonians, Persians, the people from the East, Greeks and Romans. They had 4 people already by that time. Later on, people said, well, maybe it wasn't those people. Maybe the Greeks and Romans were one. Forget the Egyptians. They didn't really attack us. They only persecuted us back in Egypt. So let's talk about people that actually invaded Israel. So it's the Greeks and Romans together, because the Greeks never really destroyed us. They kind of hurt us during the time of the Maccabees, but it wasn't until the Romans that they actually destroyed. Or sorry, so you had the Babylonians first, then you have the Romans destroyed it, and then you had, maybe they're talking about the Christians, the Byzantines, and then the Muslims, and now there'll be our chance again. So those were the 4 armies. So there were always people that would kind of try to read into who these locusts were, who these swarms are. And as I told you, there's even a version of that at Passover where we actually say that the different Chad Gadya things are, we're the kid that our father God bought for 2 zuzim, and the people that attack us are the different things, right? So the first thing that eats the goat is the cat, which is the Egyptians, because they worship the cat. And then the next thing is the dog. that attacks them, which were the Babylonians, because they used dogs. They liked dogs. They would use them for hunting. So they were the dogs. And then the stick is the Persians that beat the,
That's our song.
yeah. So the song is actually a metaphor for all the people that came against the Jews over time, right? And so there are people who right now 100% believe that that's what happened. So, you know, the Romans were represented by, the water. Goes through all of them, right? But the interesting thing is the slaughter was the Nazis. No, that was the Crusades. The Nazis are the angel of death, right? The Nazis were the angel of death because they had the death's head insignia on the SS uniforms, had the death's head. So they said, as the angel of death.
I
Which
thought that
means
was
that,
old. That song is older though.
well, yeah, but it's prophetic. Chad Gadya was from the Middle Ages, right? But it's prophetic. And the people who wrote it had no idea that the death's head insignia would be the symbol of the Nazis. They are the angel, and they were the worst, right? They're death. I mean, they were death, horrible death by the Nazis, nothing ever worse. But after that, God destroys them. And that's our redemption. So there are people who 100% believe that the modern nation of Israel is a fulfillment of the prophecy of Chad Gadya. That we had to go through all those historic levels of people who persecuted us to get to the final redemption, which we're living in now. And there are people who 100% believe that. It's not a joke to them. I mean, what I just told you is like they believe it. It's not like they run around talking about Chad Gadya all the time, but they actually say that that's what we live in. So people have looked at these things as symbols for a long time, not just here, but other parts of the Bible too, that people have looked at as symbolic of things. Like I said, with Gog and Magog, people thought that was the Soviets. Now they would say it's China. Whoever you were worried about from the East, that was Gog and Magog. So Gog from Magog, if you will. But in the Christian Bible, it's Gog and Magog. But anyways, so that is the locusts come back. But now you're going to be okay. You're going to be made whole from that. And you shall eat your fill and praise the name of the eternal your God, who dealt so wondrously with you. My people shall be shamed no more. And you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, that I, the eternal one, right, am your God, and there is none other. And my people shall be shamed no more. Ani Adonai Elohechem ve'ein od. Right? There is no other. So this is a clear understanding that there is no other God but God. You don't have any other God. And I am your God, right? I am your God, and you know it. And that's what it says. Ani Adonai Elohechem ein od. So the good news is you will be shamed no more as a nation. So that's the way chapter 2 ends, which is definitely good news. Definitely good news. And then here is the next line. That is one of the most famous lines in the book of Joel. Many would say that this is the line that, if you're going to quote one line from Joel, this shall be it. Judith, are you back on? No. So here's the
Yes.
line from chapter. You're here?
I'm here.
All right. So I would like Judith to read this line. So after we're not going to be shamed anymore, that's wonderful. That's good news. That's enough. Dainu, to use Passover terminology. But that's not it.
After that, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your elders shall dream dreams, and your youths shall see visions.
Now, why is that such a powerful and famous phrase? That one phrase. What is so powerful about that phrase? Why do people love this phrase? Anybody? Right? The old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions.
It's just a
Everybody.
great image.
Everybody. What did you say, Jude?
It's just a great image. Everybody will experience.
Yeah. So everybody will have prophetic gifts. My spirit, Ruchi, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, will come on everybody, men and women. Even says right here in the next line, Judith.
I will even pour out my spirit upon male and female slaves in those days.
Yeah, even the slaves. Wow, that's the part we don't usually quote. Yeah, everybody's going to have it, the old and the young and everybody, even slaves. Not a good thing to remember that people were still slaves then.
This is why.
Why?
Because prophecy, dreams, and visions were the three recognized ways in which human beings receive communication from God.
Yes, but the important part here, yes, but people will actually be talking like prophets. God will literally be touching everybody. They'll be running around speaking on behalf of God. But so in reality, there's actually, so the first line is, I will pour my spirit on flesh, your sons and daughters shall prophesy. So that is, I'll pour my ruach on you, my spirit, and your sons and daughters will prophesy. So your children will, but it says boys and girls will prophesy, which flat out says that men and women will prophesy. Everybody, men and women, right? So that's important, but those two things are paralleled. The next two things that are paralleled, it says your elders shall dream dreams and your youth shall see visions. Now that is beautiful too. Just on the face of it, it's just great. Everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of age, will be prophesizing. And then the last part is, regardless of social status, doesn't matter where your social status is, you are going to be prophesizing by then, in that day. In that day, everybody's going to be speaking with God. But what's so powerful about that one line, that one half of the line, if you will, of the verse, it says, your elders shall dream dreams and your youth shall see visions. That's actually a flip of what you'd think. What's so powerful about this, and what a lot of people miss from this line, isn't just that everyone gets to prophesize, but the people actually do it in the reverse way that you think they do it. Because normally in the ancient world, and to some extent we even say that today, who has the dreams, right? The dreamer, the person who's dreaming, is a youthful person. They're the ones who are thinking about, oh, what if I did this? What if I did that? They're dreaming, right? They have a vision of the future. The elderly would be the ones that see visions, right? The chazon, the word for chazon almost implies that they have now the ability to have a vision, a greater vision, not so much of things that are yet to come, but what's happening. And what actually it did is it flipped it. It actually flipped the order of how this is supposed to be, which is that the old people are going to be the ones who are dreaming about the future. They're the ones who are going to give you not sage advice, but they're the ones that are going to come up to you and say, well, what if we actually put this over here, right? What if we reconfigured this and did it like this, which is not what you'd expect to hear from the older person. The older person would come and say, that's not the way we do it. Let me tell you, I have a lot of experience in this, right? Just to use put this into any field you want, any form of technology or whatever. The guy who knows how to do this stuff will say, well, listen, I got a lot of experience with this. If, this is the way it's going to work. And that's what you think, that's what experience is going to teach you. And then the visionary is going to be the kid who doesn't know what he can't know, and he comes up with some innovative idea that no one ever heard of. That's not what he just said. It's the flip. It's the older persons that's going to blow you away with a shocking new technology or a shocking new thing that you never heard before. Wow. So that's what's so powerful about this, is he flipped it. He didn't just say everyone's going to prophesy. It's going to go against everything that you think would happen. And that's what's so exciting about this, is that the elderly are literally going to have that kind of excitement and innovation that you expect to have only when you're young. That's a great vision. We're going to get to that. I promise you at the end, I'm going to share something with you. So, yeah, the last part of it is, kind of the part that we don't talk about that much, which is that, the slaves too, they're even going to be talking. This is really important though, in all seriousness, for Christians, because Christians took this up too, because Christians, actually, some of their earlier followers were slaves, right? People don't talk about it a lot, but one of the ways that Christianity spread in the Roman Empire was that it spread with the lower castes of people, including slaves, who thought, oh my gosh, there's a system where I actually get to be free, where I get to go to heaven. Because in those days, if you were a Roman slave, you were a slave, and you're dying a slave, and your heaven was the slave heaven. God, and again, for early followers of Jesus who were essentially getting our Jewish version of heaven, it's open to everybody. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be a slave in heaven. Remember, when the Egyptians slaughtered slaves and put them in their Pharaoh's tomb, it's so they could be the slave to Pharaoh in the next life too. I mean, isn't that a beautiful thought? Not our idea of the afterworld, which was the next life, which was, wow, there's gonna be a time when slaves aren't going to be slaves anymore. But this is even in this world though, that the slaves are going to be able to be touched by God. So it says right here, before the great and terrible day of God comes, which again seems like a day of scary stuff, I will send portents in the sky on earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. Does that sound familiar to anybody? That's the Passover line.
Passover line.
Dam ve'esh, the Timrod Ashan. When we take out the plagues, when we do the plagues, check this part out next time you're looking in your Haggadah. If you have a full Haggadah, if you have your full Haggadah in front of you, you're going to see that line. And you're like, what? The prophet Joel made it into Passover? Yes, he did. In that line right there. So that is the, I'll pop it up for you to see. But that is the little bit there that you get. You get I was just going to show you. Hold a second. Let me just pop up because this is here too. I'm going to give you a Haggadah that is in English. This is the great thing about Sepharia. Even Haggadah is there. So when we do the 10 plagues, right? It's right here, right? We go through the plagues, right? And at the end of the Magid, we do the plagues. And with wonders, this refers to blood, as it says in Joel 3:3. I will place my wonders in the skies and in the earth. And when he says blood, fire, and pillars of smoke, and the 10 plagues, and Detzach, Adash, and Ba'achav, he should pour a little wine from his cup for blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. So this is the little weird thing that you see in your Haggadah where it talks about taking out more wine. I take out wine from, that's actually the first place that we ever had taking out any wine. We didn't originally have taking out for each of the plagues. It's only later on when we start doing Dam, Svardea, and taking out a little wine. But the first time we actually do it, and the first place we ever heard of it, was right here. Pour a little wine out from his cup, as he says the words blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. So that is the line from the Haggadah that we just read. So that's probably the most famous part of Joel that, is where people go, there's Joel. But again, there's a lot of prophets that are mentioned, a lot of prophetic books that you'll see next time you go through the Haggadah. This Passover, you'll see some of them. You'll go, I know that. I read that line from Isaiah. I read that line from Ezekiel. I know that line. So you'll start to see it pop up, and you'll know the context. You'll actually know where it came from. So again, if the sun shall turn into darkness and the moon into blood, that's pretty scary, John. The sun is going to be dark and the moon will be blood. Means there's a blood moon against a dark sky. That is frightening. That's frightening. That's a frightening image. That's a scary revelation-y kind of situation where, again, you can understand why Christians looked at this book and said, oh, that's what we're talking about at the end of days. Oh, Joel described it. The sky turns dark and the moon turns to blood. Very scary. All right, Judith, why don't you read this next one? This next line, though. Forgot.
But everyone who invokes God's name shall escape, for there shall be a remnant on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, as God promised. Anyone who invokes God will be among the survivors.
Yeah, and so that's the part that, again, look how short chapter 3 is, which is why there are versions of this book, as I said, in the Septuagint, where it's only 3 chapters. That chapter is super, super short. But there are people, and again, we thought, at least the way it doesn't really necessarily go with chapter 4, you can make the decision, that this is an idea that maybe has a few different ideas, but that there will be people who survive the dark days. And again, this is where you get the ideas of rapture and a remnant that gets to survive, right? It's the remnant or the small group left behind who survived this. Yeah. So this seems to maybe again describe what would happen when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, or a destruction that is still yet to come. That is up to interpretation. But it does say that people will escape by invoking God's name.
But
I will tell you that the people who built this building that we're sitting in right now, 100% believe that, because they are called Jehovah's Witnesses, the JWs. And they witness the name of God that we don't pronounce, and it's not Jehovah, so I have no issue saying it, because that's not the way it was pronounced. But they invoke the name of God. They love the name of God. They invoke the name of God. Why? Because Joel says to invoke the name of God. And we don't, because you don't go around saying God's name. We say the Lord. We say Hashem. We don't say the name. But they do. Because Joel seems to say that you say it. Say it out loud. Oh, maybe. I don't. But they believe it. And they believe that it's a very small remnant that gets to stay behind, that gets to survive. Does anybody know how many people get to survive, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses? John knew. 144,000. Everybody else is gone. And that definitely seems to be
12 by
a
12.
remnant. A remnant. Yes.
But it wouldn't have to be in heaven, because if there's a.
Yeah. Well, that's why they started by that point, by the 1800s, when the Jehovah's Witnesses started, they could start to imagine that, yeah, it can't be in this world. I don't know. I mean, how do they come up with that? I mean, there's allusions to it here. There's allusions to it in the Christian Bible that there's going to be only a remnant. We now know the Dead Sea Scrolls community believed it too, that they were the only ones that were going to survive. This idea that there's going to be some group that survives, I mean, I don't know. I mean, some people would say it makes sense that it's in the world to come, but I mean, they seem to believe that. But is it also not? And again, it's 144,000 because it's 12 tribes and it's 12,000 for each tribe. That's how they came up with it, right? Stupid that, how do you come up with that number? It's not a random number. It's based on our 12 tribes. But there are people who believe that, there will be a plague, or there'll be some kind of destruction that'll hit this earth, and there'll only be some survivors. That's the fantasy or the fear, the latent fear that we've all had. Some people say, by the way, it's not even a human fear. Some people say it's a fear that was passed on to us by our mammalian ancestors who survived the cataclysm of the last great earth cataclysm when the dinosaurs died. And that's even a pre-human memory that was passed on to us. And only some life survived. Only very few life forms were able to make it through that period. So I don't know. That's what some people believe now, that there's pre-human memories that we have of destruction. Anyways, but yes, some will survive. And here's the last chapter. For lo, oh, Judith, you read. Sorry.
No, all right. For lo, in those days and in that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Yehoshaphat. There I will contend with them over my very own people Israel, which they scattered among the nations, for they divided my land among themselves.
Yeah, if you look at the note here, the valley of Yehoshaphat, which is interesting because it's a play on the word nishpati, right? I will judge them in the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now there is a king named Jehoshaphat, so he was an actual guy, Yehoshaphat. So there is an emek, of Jehoshaphat, but here it's a play on words. I will bring them down, which again, I don't like the word contend with them, because it could be read literally, I will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Well, essentially they've already been judged because they're still alive, but that's where their judgment will happen. That's what the word nishpati means. Yehoshaphat means God will judge, Yehoshaphat. But the word here in Hebrew, you don't notice it with the word contend is what I'm saying. That's why a translation should be, I will judge them. What, Mary, is that what the King James says, or does it say contend? Oh, probably
It says, and will plead with them.
Yeah, which is like the contend, but it is the sense of shaphat in Hebrew. It's shaphat and shaphat. So this is a powerful line, not one that I forgot ever, can forget.
For they divided my land among themselves and cast lots over my people. And they bartered a boy for a whore and sold a girl for wine, which they drank.
Yeah. Is that meant to be literal? I don't know, but it's a horrible image because it means that the Israelites or the Judahites, when they were taken away, that they were worth so little that people bought the Israelites or Judahite boys for the price of a whore. So the price of an act of sex, not for a whole whore. It's not like they bought the whore, because the next line is they sold a girl for wine which they drank. They sold our people for an act of sex or for a good drink, for a little, for an alcohol. That's it. For a trip to the bar or a trip to the whorehouse, we bought people. They were sold. Our people were sold. So that tells you that their lives were worth nothing. And it's meant to be, their lives were worth nothing. Their lives were literally worth pennies. Because these were things that, while they're, people do them even to this day, they're not things that we're necessarily supposed to be encouraged to be doing, for sure. And they're over in a second. And that's what these people's lives were worth. That's it. It's a very powerful image. It's not, I don't know what to say. It's one of the most powerful images of letting somebody know that their lives were worth nothing. But that's what happened. So Joel is not happy with that. Like most of the prophets, and again, whether that literally happened or whether he felt that's what was happening, it's a very powerful line. It's a very powerful line. Because it's not, they sold a boy for a whore. They sold a boy for an act of sex.
What is this you are doing to me, O Tyre, Sidon, and all the districts of Philistia? Are you requiting me for something I have done? Or are you doing something for my benefit? Quick as a flash, I will pay you back. For you have taken my gold and my silver, and have carried off my precious treasures to your palaces. And you have sold the people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem to the Ionians, so that you have removed them far away from their homeland.
Yeah, and so who gets held accountable here? The people of the coasts, the maritime traders, the Phoenicians and the Philistines, who are the ones that control the coast, the people who are in Gaza and in Jaffa and in Haifa and in Tyre and Sidon, and all along the coast are carrying our people off into slavery. Now, what's interesting about this, though, and one of the reasons why people say this is from a later date, is because it just flew throughout the word Ionian, which is Greek. In Hebrew, it's Yavanim. The Hebrew word for Greeks, even to this day, is Yavanim, Yavan, which is Ionia. Now, that's only one part of Greece. The Ionians were only one Greek people, right? There was Mycenaeans and Cretans and lots of different places. But Ionia is in modern day on the Greek coast. It's not an island, right? It's part of, Ionia is part of Greece. The Greeks and the Israelites didn't have connections like this until the later period, right? We don't have connections with the Greeks until the fourth century, because Greece wasn't a power then. And if we came into contact with Greeks, they were from Crete, they were from Mycenae, we didn't call them Ionian. So that's a fairly late phrase. It's not, look, we have the word Yavan mentioned in the lists of the table of nations that's mentioned in Genesis, lists the Ionians. It's not like they weren't named. The name is there. The word Ashkenaz is there. We've talked about. There's 70 countries that are named there. Ionia is one of them. But we don't have a description of anything remotely like the Greeks on the Greek peninsula until this time, until this moment, until this reference here. We have not seen them any other time. We've seen the words Philistines used a lot. And the Philistines probably came from the Greek islands, from Crete and from other places there. But at that time, those were more powerful than Ionia, than what would later be Athens and Sparta, all of those places. Remember, those countries, those city-states don't become powerful until the 5th century. In Socrates, you're talking about, again, the height of the rise of the Greek city-state is the 500s. By 300, that's when you have Alexander the Great. So they're not a force yet. So that's why some people say that Joel is late, because of this line right here. Because they're involved in the slave trade, and it says right here that the people of Judah and Jerusalem are being sold to Ionians, meaning they're going back to Greece. So to some extent, by the way, that implies that whenever Joel was written, there was already a Jewish population that had been moved to the Greek peninsula. Again, here it seems against their will, but there might have been other Jews who lived in Ionia at the time because they were part of the trading, the trading and the city-state system that the Greeks had by that point. But is it from that point, or is it an earlier point where Ionia isn't that popular or powerful yet? I don't know. But this is why some people say that it's later. That this seems to be a time of the 400s, after the Jews have already come back from the Persians. I don't know for sure. I don't want to make too much of a decision based on one line, but there's a lot of implications here. And one of them is that there were Jews, at least Jewish slaves, that were, according to Joel, were already living in Greece by this point. And I mean mainland Greece. I don't mean Greek islands. I don't mean Crete. I don't mean, Aegean islands that are close by. I'm talking about inside Greece itself.
It's interesting because the 4:3,
Yeah. Yes.
We really haven't matured, have we?
Why?
Because there's still trafficking going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a sad statement.
Yeah.
I mean, you may turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Let's
But
phrase that.
what can people be bought and sold? John is asking for today. Yeah. It's terrible.
It's horrible. That one movie, I didn't see it, but it applies directly to that. recent movie, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're talking about human trafficking. The guy who goes after the traffickers. Yeah. It's a horrible idea. People will be trafficked like that. Our people were trafficked like that, according to this, for nothing. All right, here's what it says. Judith.
Behold, I will rouse them to leave the place you have sold them to, and I will pay you back. I will deliver your sons and daughters into the hands of the people of Judah, and they will sell them into captivity to a distant nation, for God has spoken.
Yeah, so listen, people of Tyre, Sidon, Philistines, guess what? It's coming back, right? And you're going to be sold. I'll deliver your sons and daughters into the people of Judah, and they will sell them. So your punishment's coming back to you. You're going to get it. And again, it seems to imply that we're going to be turning a profit on them one day. That's not a great idea, but it's payback. Here's what it says. Listen to this one.
Proclaim this among the nations, prepare for battle, arouse the warriors, let all the fighters come and draw near. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let even the weaklings say, I am strong.
Yeah, that's a reverse, right? That's not what we normally say, right? We say beat your swords into plowshares and your pruning hooks and your spears into pruning hooks. This is the reverse. We're going into battle. So yeah, the line works really beautifully as a way to say, and again, it's two places in the Bible. It's in the prophet Micah and also in Isaiah. But this phrase is seen as like the most beautiful way of saying we're at peace, because we can turn our weapons into implements for harvesting for our own use. That's very, in the ancient world, that was very real, because they actually used, you didn't have a lot of metal. It was very expensive. And they literally would use their spears as pruning hooks. They literally would use, that's what they take their stuff over to the blacksmith, and the blacksmith would get that sword into the shape of a plowshare again. It didn't take long to turn your pruning hook into a spear, right? You just bent it around. You bent it around and it becomes a pruning hook, and you bend it back. It's now back to being a spear. So this is real. But the phrase is so poetic and so powerful because, number one, people can see it. But even today, even when we don't use swords and spears and pruning hooks and plowshares, we understand what it means, because when we talk about having times we live in during a peace dividend, when we can use the technology that we have, and we can use the people that we normally would have to put into war, that they can be productive and they can help our help our economy, be a vital part of our economy. I mean, look, this is what Israel is dealing with right now, is the loss every day to its economy of men and women who have to serve in the army right now. So even though there's not literally swords and spears, there is a huge economic toll that this war is having on Israel, because Israel is having its young people not being able to work. So there's an economic cost of, hundreds of millions of dollars and now into the billions of dollars over these 4 months of people who can't work and can't do their jobs.
That's to the detriment of Judeo-Christian thinking, that those that don't think the way you do will somehow think the way you do by trying to incorporate them into what we call the world or the League of Nations. Yeah, all kinds of ways. One is economic, and we're seeing that play out multiple places in the world. Russia, China, right? You try to build a McDonald's in Russia, it doesn't matter. right? He tried to, he tried to engage with China for 40 years, right, in an economic benefit, right, by outsourcing.
Yeah.
And we become no closer to them other than just.
Well, listen, I'm not going to despair completely of China. I mean, I think we have to be very careful with China, right? I believe they're our most dangerous enemy. But on the other hand, what keeps them behaving well is the economic costs of, what a war would do to their economy. Look, they're paying attention. That's why they're paying attention to what happens in Russia so carefully, because Russia's economy has not been crippled like we thought it would. They're selling their oil to India and it's getting back to the West through India, as we know. That's a sad thing, but yeah, people are paying attention to it. But the hope that economic dependency would create peace and would create a more stable world is being challenged
Economic
right now.
Interdependence.
Yeah. Yeah, we hoped it would create peace. I would say that in reality, I mean, we're in the worst stage we've been in 40 years. But for the most of the last 40, 50 years, 60 years even, we have seen that happen. I mean, the last time the level of American death that we've had in war back to Vietnam, I mean, I'm not saying Vietnam is a perfect place right now, but Vietnam is like completely dependent on the West right now for its economy. And they're like, you can go to Vietnam and you'll be treated. I mean, I haven't been there, but everyone I know who's been there, it's been treated very well. I mean, there's peace in a place where 60,000 Americans almost were died, and we have peace with them. Again, I'm not advocating that we need to have a war in order to prove our relationship with people, but we really haven't had a war directly with the Soviet Union. We haven't really, and then with Russia. We haven't had a war with China directly since the Boxer Rebellion. I will tell you that we did have a war with Vietnam, and now we have pretty strong relations. I mean, I can argue pretty clearly that we have a better relationship with Vietnam than we have with China right now. So I believe that it's possible for there to be, this can happen.
What makes anybody on this conversation believe there'll be peace on Earth? Well, let me finish. Since it's been impossible since Cain and Abel.
Yes.
So what makes anyone?
No,
I don't understand. What, Judeo-Christian? You think that spreading that is going to?
Well, I believe that, yeah, people have to be able to have the principles of liberal democracy, of free press, of free assembly, of not killing their, opponents, murdering their opponents. Those are all symbols of kind of freedom. So yeah, until there's more countries that, look, the reality is, you said, we reminded that, 1/3 or half of our world is still living under totalitarian dictatorship. So we have a ways to go. But in the West, we know we have not had a war between two liberal democracies. It hasn't happened. It won't happen. It won't happen. So we have the elements for it. We just don't know if we can get there. We don't know if we can get there. But I hope we can get there. The vision was we could get there, but we're not. I mean, look, Joel is talking about us. He's talking about our own people. He's basically saying,
we all derived from our people.
yeah.
If it wasn't.
Yes.
Noah's kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, but well, let's finish it. Let's look at how Joel finishes. So right now the Philistines and the Phoenicians are going to get paid back. They're going to get paid back. But so right now it's not like the peaceful world, but we're getting there. Keep going, Judith.
Rouse yourselves and come, all you nations, come together from round about. There bring down your warriors, O Eternal One. Let the nations rouse themselves and march up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit in judgment over all the nations round about. Swing the sickle, for the crop is ripe. come and tread, for the winepress is full, the vats are overflowing, for great is their wickedness. Multitudes upon multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of God is at hand in the valley of decision.
So again, that is Valley of Jehoshaphat, the Valley of Decision. This is where this final battle, so to speak, is going to come.
Is it the same? It's not, does it say Yehoshaphat?
It's not Har Megiddo. It's not Megiddo. This
Okay.
is in Jerusalem.
Sun and moon are darkened and stars withdraw their brightness, and God will roar from Zion and shout aloud from Jerusalem so that heaven and earth tremble. But God will be a shelter to this covenanted people, a refuge to the children of Israel. For you shall know that I, the eternal, your God, dwell in Zion, my holy mount, and Jerusalem shall be holy. Nevermore shall strangers pass through it.
Oh yeah, this is why there are people now who are saying we don't want Muslims up on the Temple Mount, because never more shall strangers pass through it, is what he's talking about, right?
But if everyone's God's children, no one's a stranger.
I know, but that's the argument, right? The argument is that strangers aren't supposed to pass through it.
So non-Jew.
Yeah.
And in that day,
Yeah.
the mountains shall drip with wine, the hills shall flow with milk, and all the watercourses of Judah shall flow with water. A spring shall issue from the house of God and shall water the wadi of the acacias. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom a desolate waste, because of the outrage to the people of Judah, to whose land they shed the blood of the innocent.
And so there's Egypt and the Edomites being called out too. So we had Tyre and Sidon, we had the coastal people, and also the people of the south, and also the people on the east. They all took part in this destruction, which is why some people say that this was written after the destruction, because the Egyptians and the Edomites took part in our destruction by the Babylonians. We read about that before, right? They got chastised by Jeremiah, right? He called him out. Ezekiel called him out. Obadiah, we're about to read the book of Obadiah. The whole book is calling out the Edomites. Yep. Right? Because of the outrage to the people of Judah. And here's how it finishes.
But Judah shall be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem throughout the ages. Thus I will treat as innocent their blood that I have not treated as innocent, and God shall dwell in Zion.
So that day is a good day for us. It's a bad day for our enemies. It's a bad day for them. But God will dwell on Zion. That is a good day, right? That's a good day that Judah will be inhabited forever and Jerusalem throughout the ages. Lador Vador. Jerusalem throughout the ages. So this is the vision that we have, that the people of Israel will be redeemed, that their enemies will be punished, that they'll be in their home forever. This is why, again, Christians interpreted that this was what the end of days would be like. But you can see that for us, and in the real context of where this is laid out, this is us in our land. I mean, this isn't us in heaven. It's pretty clear. The last words are, you live in the land of Judah and Jerusalem forever. It's not you go to heaven. It's not a rapture. It's you get to live in your land forever. And that is the punishment for our enemies, and our repentance brings reward. Look, it's one of the reasons why I do think that this is a beautiful vision of not like what happens after we die, but what can happen here. Now, I promised you one special thing we're going to finish with today, which is the line of Joel that was so beautiful, right? The old shall dream dreams, which is not, I don't even know if we could call them old anymore. That's not even a politically correct, the elderly or what is it? What would be
Seniors.
The youth inhibited, the youth,
Inhibited.
what's the
Seniors.
proper phrase?
Seniors.
What does it say? Your old men shall dream dreams. This is This is a version of this that I want to share with you. Right here. This is the words from Joel, which Debbie Friedman turned into a song, a beautiful, beautiful song. And I'm going to share the music, hopefully that you can hear it. But this is the Debbie Friedman song that came out. I realized that I looked this up. It came out the year that I was bar mitzvah. So you can imagine that's how old that song is.
You're old.
I'm old. And I did love this song as a kid. Oh, this is not the version I want to play. I want you to play the song that she actually sings. Here it is. Hopefully I can play it through here. Here we go. This is Debbie Friedman singing. Wait, where is it? It's not playing. It says I don't have it on this computer. Of course I do. All right, hold it a second. Here we go. I'm going to play it through Apple Music. And I'll post up the lyrics. Okay, here we go.
It's with our theme to play from Apple
Do
Music.
you know this song, Judith?
Not to recognize, not
Okay,
from
I'm
the
gonna
word
play it for you.
alone.
All right, here we go. I mean, look, she was not known as a singer. She was known as a composer, but we're going to have her sing her song. Okay, hold it a second. You hear it?
Nope.
Hold it. You hear it? No?
Just getting the echo again.
You hear the song though?
Nope.
Okay. Whole flute beginning isn't necessary. I don't know why. Whoa. Now I have the echo. Hold it 1 second. Oh, here. Here we go. Actually. Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Childhood was for fantasies, for nursery rhymes and toys. The world was much too busy to understand small girls and boys. As I grew up, I came to learn that life was not a game, that heroes were just people that we called another name. And the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must feel for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Now I'm grown, the years have passed, I've come to understand there are choices to be made, and my life's at my command. I cannot have a future till I embrace my past. I promise to pursue the challenge, time is going fast. And the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. Today's the day I take my stand. The future's mine to hold. Commitments that I make today are dreams from days of old. I have to make the way for generations come and go. I'll have to teach them what I've learned so they will come to know that the old shall dream dreams and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today. We must live. Give us love. Give us love. Give us love.
It got weird.
So what do you think?
It's
What did you think?
so 80s.
So 80s. But I remember when that came out in 81 or whatever, when I was bar mitzvah, that was a song. The last line is, this is your time, right? This is your time. I mean, she wrote it, I think, to some extent for bar mitzvah kids too. I mean, the last line is today's take my stand, right? The future's mine to hold. So.
I think the children should start singing that.
Yep. All right. Well, now we're getting the feedback again. Oh, no, it's gone. But yeah, it's a good message for kids to understand their connection to the past and to the future. And the dreams that we dream are the dreams that our ancestors had. And that's part of what she did with the song, is take that line and give it a meaning for us today. But yes, sounds very 80s. It sounds that it's very 80s sound to it, but it doesn't have to be sung like that. It can be sung a little with a little bit of newer sounds. But as we get, it's exciting because when we get into the Psalms, which will be in about a couple months, we'll be reading the book of Psalms. We're going to be listening to a lot of music then, and lots of different genres. But Debbie Friedman was genius at taking words from the Torah and giving them new life, and giving them context and helping us. So we're, as I said, the words from Joel, they're in the Haggadah. There's the Haftarah before Yom Kippur. There's some times when we encounter it, or maybe we won't even see it. But that song gave a whole lot of people a chance to meet Joel who would normally have met him. So again, as we finish the book of Joel and say Tam v'neshalem te'ilale el borei olam, to give thanks to God for a book we just finished, come back tomorrow night for Pirkei Avot, where we're going to actually, God willing, have a chance to hear. I'm going to play another song tomorrow night from a line from Pirkei Avot that was turned into music about 81 to, about 30 years later, a more contemporary, a next generation of singers, a singer who loved Debbie Friedman, by the way, but was a different generation. He wrote a song from part of Pirkei Avot. So join us tomorrow, Wednesday night, for Pirkei Avot. We're going to read one of my favorite lines from Pirkei Avot, from the beginning of chapter 4. We're going to read. So we'll see everybody soon. And don't forget, 3 Shabbat services in March. We don't have one this Friday night, but we have the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th, including Joe Buchanan on the 8th. Joe Buchanan is such a gift for us that John is flying out his family to be there for Joe Buchanan, which is awesome. So, so just understand that we're going to try to bring in Adar with as much joy as we can. And that's what we're going to do throughout the month of Adar. So everybody stay positive. Try to stay positive. It's Adar. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Judith. We'll see you soon.
Everybody.
Stay dry, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.
How can we stay positive after we